The Blue-White Illustrated Penn State Football and Recruiting Podcast returns for the first episode of August. We have so much to get to. The Lash Bash, some new commitments, a decommitment who was back on campus. Summer camp is right around the corner. He's Ryan Snyder. I'm Greg Pickel. We are talking on Tuesday, August 3rd, as the Nittany Lions prepare to kick off camp later this week. But obviously, as you guys have come to know, listening to the show for about a month now, we get to a lot of recruiting stuff, Ryan, and we certainly have no shortage of it to get to this week. Just a lot going on for Penn State, of course, throughout the month of July, but certainly during the last week and to close the last weekend.
Number one class in the country, who I didn't see that coming, obviously, with everything happening over at Ohio State, losing the decommitment. Quinn Ewers, of course, deciding to enroll. That put the Nittany Lions in the top spot. Won't last too long. You know, Notre Dame, Ohio State will add a couple more guys, and they'll move down. We'll talk about where this class projects long term down the road. But it's great to see. You know, a lot of recruits have mentioned that to us this week, Greg. I'm sure they have to you too. I know they have to me at least. You know, just seeing Penn State as one of the top classes. So good for them. They're pretty much maxed out now with 24. You know, after adding Cristian Driver, KJ Winston, and Abdul Carter. But this is recruiting. You know, they can always kind of find a way to add one or two more, and I think they will try to do that. But for the most part, 24 was kind of the number we were projecting, and now I think it could be 25, 26. So we'll see how it plays out.
Well, plenty of momentum for Penn State. That's how it got to this point of having so many commitments, rising to the top spot in the Rivals rankings. As you note, as you saw on the screen there, I'll throw it up one more time if you're watching on YouTube. But Penn State certainly outpacing almost every other program in the top five. Notre Dame with 19 commits is the only one that's even remotely in the ballpark, and they're standing at dead center field, whereas Penn State's at home plate. So obviously, let's get to the commitments first. Let's start there, then we'll dive into all the news and notes and reactions from the Lash Bash. Penn State closes out the month with 3 commitments over the course of 2 days, starting with Cristian Driver, the 4-star athlete, probably a future receiver, could be a safety, Texas native. Dad Donald played for Green Bay, of course, spent a season with James Franklin in Green Bay, and this was one where, Ryan, going into it, there may have been other hats on the table. There may have been other schools who were considered finalists. I would throw air quotes around that word because this seemed like Penn State's to lose really for quite some time now. And there were no surprises. He picks Penn State, joins the class, is, again, a guy who could play either safety or receiver.
Yeah. Oklahoma and Texas A&M were interested, recruiting him and all that, but they liked him at safety. Michigan State, Mississippi State, made a late push. Wisconsin was in there too, but as we mentioned on the last pod, Wisconsin wanted him to come for a game during the season, which means they kind of think they were trying to figure some things out there. That's what that tells me. But 6 foot 185, might be a little closer to 5'11", but we have him at 6 foot 185. And as you mentioned, wide receiver is the likely position. He's pretty adamant that's where he wants to play. And Penn State thinks he's definitely a good enough receiver to give him an opportunity there. A lot of people think safety is where he best projects, and there's just more film on that. He was pretty solid as a receiver during his junior year. A great route runner. That's the first thing that grabs my attention. Thomas Frank Carr did a great breakdown. Definitely suggest you guys checking that out on our YouTube channel then. But just a solid route runner. I would say not a burner. His coach told us he runs 4.5. I think 4.6 is probably a little more fair from what we see on film. And 43 scholarship offers, man. And as we mentioned, a lot of schools liked him at safety, but 43 offers is the most of any other player in this class. So a lot of interest all across the country. A lot of the Southern schools really liked him at safety, though. And once he was adamant about wide receiver, which really started to emerge after last season, that's when Penn State and a couple other schools really started to take the lead. And after his official visit, it was definitely clear that Penn State was the school. So good pickup for Penn State. Versatile player, man. That's what it really comes down to. Penn State loves versatility. You can look at so many guys in this class that could play multiple positions. So he's another one. Great character too. I think anyone who watched his commitment presentation, I guess we'll call it, really saw. He's got his head on straight. Parents raised him right. Great person. I've really enjoyed talking to him over the years, and I think Penn State fans are going to enjoy getting to know him, as we get to interview him more in the media room.
Yeah, let's not get too far into the weeds here, but I do think, Ryan, it's something that a lot of people are interested in and maybe don't know too much about. Walk us through, from your experience, what the delicate balance is of knowing what position a kid wants to play versus knowing what position you think he might be best at, and how you blend those two together to just get him in your class, get him on campus. Obviously,
Mhm.
Wisconsin, between the visit and maybe not messaging that so well, maybe took itself out of the mix to an extent, and Penn State did the exact opposite.
Yeah, at the end of the day, man, you just got to be open and honest. That's really how Penn State approaches everything. I mean, so many guys come back to, just honesty and telling them what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. I
Right.
think hundreds and hundreds of players have told me that over the years, and that's been very successful for Franklin and his staff. So, with Cristian, look, he's a good receiver too. If you, like I mentioned, T. Frank's film about, I mean, T. Frank likes him more as a receiver. So there's a lot of potential there on both sides of the ball, and Penn State really was pretty open on both. There was a lot of other schools who, firmly preferred safety, where Penn
Right.
State really wasn't that way. They are fine with either side of the ball. So for this recruitment, that wasn't too hard to deal with. I know Flowers, I think definitely Penn State prefers him on defense. And at one point, Flowers liked wide receiver. So, and don't get me wrong, I think Flowers is going to play defense now, but we'll see what happens there. So just a delicate balance, man, just being honest,
Hmm.
his parents, obviously his dad, everyone knows his history. They get it. They understand, Penn State has to do what's best for them, but they can't miss out on an elite player. So just being open with them and honest throughout the process. That's really what it was all about.
All right, well, let's move on to, and by the way, if you want to find Thomas Frank Carr's film evaluations, visit our YouTube page, or evaluations rather, youtube.com/Blue White Illustrated. Of course, you can find those and all of the other recruiting and Penn State football team content at bwi.rivals.com. Let's move on to the second of those three commitments to close out July. It's KJ Winston, another guy who had another finalist in Maryland, and I think we both felt like the Terps definitely had their foot in the door. They weren't just a hat on the table that looked nice and that, he could choose between two schools, and that's why they were there. I think they put a strong push in, but the four-star safety, a DeMatha Catholic guy, a really talented player, Ryan, he picks Penn State, and again, not maybe a shocker because Penn State had put itself in such great position, but certainly I think a relief, and the relief may not be the right word, but when you think you're in that driver's seat, it's nice to just make sure you're there, get a commitment in the class, and they did that here.
Yeah, well, the opposite happened earlier with two cornerbacks who ended up going elsewhere, where they, were silent commits and ended up going elsewhere. So it it is a relief, to get him across the finish line. But with Winston, well, first off, Winston was at the Lash Bash. We kept that kind of quiet for him, knowing he was going to commit on Saturday. But he was here this past weekend, which made 3 visits for him this summer. And when I look back, obviously the official visit's important. He spoke really highly of his time with Keaton Ellis and some of the other DBs. But it was that second visit that I think really kind of put Penn State where they are. Let me do the timeline real quick. His first official visit was mid-June. Then he went to Maryland the weekend after that, which was, I think, the third weekend in June. Then he comes back to Penn State for the fourth weekend in June. And that fourth weekend, he was originally supposed to go to Notre Dame. Notre Dame starts filling up, focuses on other guys, and that opens him up to come for the Lion Strong 7-on-7 tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And he ends up staying the night that Friday. And that was also, of course, the same weekend where all of Penn State's committed players were here. And, in the days leading up from that, after his Maryland visit, I already put a pick in for Penn State. And I was like starting to think, oh, man, maybe Maryland really does have a chance here. So getting him back then, hanging out with all the players, spending the night, in the days after that, when I started talking to him again, that's when I realized, okay, this is Penn State's to lose. So just a very confident player. That's what I see on film, an aggressive player, definitely ahead of most when it comes to tackling. Every high school player can, improve in open field tackling, but I think he's pretty good at that. And then just, when he gets interceptions, if you watch this film, man, he just reads the quarterback so well. And that's something that Penn State's kind of lacked in recent years as far as anticipating jumping passes. So if he's able to do that at this next level, it'll get him on the field pretty quickly. So, but just another, great kid, smart player, good leader, a lot of things to like. I'm looking forward to seeing DeMatha this year. They have a heck of a schedule, as they always do. So that'll be fun to go down there and see him at some point. But I really like KJ. He's been one of my favorite players in this class for a long time. Always been open with the media, fun to deal with. I'd love to get him on here in our podcast at some point down the road. So Penn State fans, another guy Penn State fans are going to love to get to know.
Yeah, we're going to try and get more of commitments and recruits and things like that on the show in the coming weeks. Yeah, Winston was a guy, Ryan, who the visits told a tale, and that's a recruiting thing as old as time, and it's not 100%. Obviously, we've seen Penn State host guys multiple times and then lose them, surprisingly. But this was one where they really got out in front early, kept the visit train rolling, and it helped them lock up a commitment. So let's move on to the last commitment of July. I mean, again, it was such a successful seventh month of the year for Penn State that you sometimes forget about all the guys that committed before this last rush, and we've spent a lot of time talking about them, of course, on previous episodes, and many of them were at the Lash Bash, which we'll talk about shortly. But let's hit on Abdul Carter. Obviously, Penn State hoping for another linebacker in this class. They already had one in heading into Lash Bash weekend, and they're able to close the deal with Carter, who I think really, I underrate it, might not be fair, but I do think that he's a guy who, to me anyway, when I watch him and when I see what he's able to do, I think he could be a fairly quick to the field guy. Maybe not year one, obviously, but I really like what they get in him. And if you were going to try and find another linebacker, you could have certainly, look, could you have found higher rated ones? Yeah, probably. With more offers, of course. But I really like this pickup for Penn State.
Yeah. Well, look, it's his athleticism and what he's done in testing and camps is incredible. And if he's able to, take that athleticism, take that explosion and translate it to the field in the coming years, then yeah, what you're saying is possible. When we watch his film a little bit, he's a little hesitant at times. This is, again, something that T. Frank pointed out. Would really highly suggest you check out his evaluation on Abdul Carter, because I thought it was one of the better ones. But when he came to the whiteout camp in the beginning of June and just put up some ridiculous numbers. I talked about a few times here: 4.5 second 40, 4.4 second shuttle at 230 pounds. Both are awesome. But the number that really grabs me is the triple broad jump, which is a 31.11. That is true 99 percentile for any high school prospect. I know it's better than any other player who committed in this class, including some of the guys who weigh a lot less and can move a lot quicker. When I see him, I see a raw athlete who still has some grooming, but the sky's the limit when it comes to what he brings physically. So, but anyway, his recruitment came down to South Carolina and Penn State for the most part, and from talking to him, I get the impression he would have waited. He would have liked to wait a little bit longer. I know South Carolina was genuinely in the mix, but when you're at 23, 24 commitments, and Penn State wants to get you up for the Lash Bash, and they're making it clear that, hey, you don't have to decide today because we need a linebacker, but things are moving quick, so you need to understand the situation. That I'm not going to say it forced his hand, because he definitely could have waited a couple more weeks, but I don't think he could have waited another month or two. Just with the way things are moving. And yes, Penn State needed a linebacker, but there's a lot of other talented players that they don't want to pass up on either. So it would have made things a bit difficult. So it's great to have him on board. Another Pennsylvania guy, man. This has been, I think when people ask what the difference is between this class and the last class, obviously, the visits and stuff are important, but how stacked Pennsylvania is something that's kind of going overlooked a bit. It's not just that they have, what is it, 9, or I think it's 7 prep players, 9 total if you include the JUCO guys. It's not that just they have those numbers, but it's how talented that Pennsylvania is, which made it easy for Penn State to really go after all these guys hard. So another solid pickup. Abdul's kind of quiet. I haven't gotten to know him as well as some of the other guys, but he's all about his business and freakishly athletic.
Yeah, there's no doubt. That's probably why I'm a little bit head over heels when it comes to talking about him looking forward, because you can just see the sheer athleticism, the raw abilities, and when you get him with Brent Pry, when you get him with Dwight Galt, you can only imagine what kind of player they can mold him into. And to your point, I mean, it's not just Pennsylvania either, right? It's Maryland, it's Massachusetts, it's Ohio, it's New York. I mean, Penn State has been fortunate in this class that a lot of the guys that really want it from the start are not just guys they want it because they were close to campus, but it certainly helped that once they were finally able to host guys again, once the pandemic ended, a lot of them didn't have, or the dead period related to the pandemic ended, rather. A lot of them didn't have too far to go. It wasn't, I mean, obviously there were some guys in this class who had to get on a plane, but a lot of them could drive. And I think that was a key part of all of this. It is the BWI Penn State Football Recruiting Podcast. He's Ryan Snyder. I'm Greg Pickel. You can visit our YouTube channel for more, youtube.com/Blue White Illustrated. Here's a look at the Tuesday, August 3rd homepage over at bwi.rivals.com. A lot of team news, a lot of recruiting, and if you scroll through the homepage, Ryan, you're going to find a ton of recruiting news because the Lash Bash wrapped up over the weekend. Obviously, the premier event for Penn State recruiting in the month of July and the summer in general. Barbecue, food, yard games, a scavenger hunt, just a really great day, I think, for the program. And maybe the headliner was the commitments, or maybe it was the fact that Tyreese Fearbry, who decommitted, I can't talk. I just suddenly developed an inability to talk about halfway through the show, but commits on July 4, decommits, and now he's back in the mix. And obviously, that's quite a big deal for Penn State.
Yeah, well, he decommitted 2 days before showing up on campus.
Correct.
And I think fans were upset that he decommits 3.5 weeks or so after committing. But look, he simply rushed the process. I think a few of us thought when he committed that he may have been rushing it a bit. And it's simple. He still likes Pitt a lot, and I think he likes Penn State a lot. And I know he was at Pitt, I believe, twice last week. Going over there, talking to them more. He just realized he rushed it a bit, and that's really all it is. I think Penn State has a chance with him still, although history suggests that when a player decommits, it's usually not a good thing. I still believe, right. They've only ever added maybe 2-3 players max since Franklin took over who decommitted and then recommitted. So we'll see what happens. Numbers are tight. But he's a heck of a player, another Pennsylvania guy, and they definitely don't want to lose anybody to Pitt, especially when they had him previously committed. So I expect Penn State to keep pushing hard. He's a great kid, man. I think fans have been a little hard on him a bit. I think it's because of Pitt, obviously. That's part of it. It's because of decommitting so soon. That's part of it. But look, it's good that he decommitted now than in 4 months from now, in November or whenever it is. So give him that, respect the fact that he realized it early, respect the fact that he told the staff pretty quickly about it. And, that helps Penn State moving forward, helps the player moving forward. At the end of the day, I've only had a couple limited conversations with him, but, I could tell he's a good kid who's just trying to figure everything out. He has good people around him, too. I've known the Team Evolve guys for a long time. They're just trying to help him figure out wherever's best for him. So I like Tyreese. I think, like I said, I think fans were a little hard on him, after decommitting, and it's all comes back down to Penn State versus Pitt and how they don't play each other a lot anymore. They did recently, but not at least in the future. There's still very much a rivalry there.
No question, yes, and fans, especially the ones who remember the great battles that these two programs have had over the years, still harbor some of that, shall we say, discontent for the other program. So yeah, we'll see how that one plays out. Again, I agree with you. I think that the reaction was a little harsh. I think that the fact that he decided to do this when he did was a big deal, because again, if he was gonna wait until December, Penn State probably has no recourse at that point to try and fill that spot. Now they have time. They keep recruiting him, but also realize that if the tea leaves start to fall the wrong way, Ryan, that they can go after another one of these top targets on their board and be able to do that. We'll talk about some of those guys in a little bit, but let's recap the Lash Bash. You had a premium notebook up Inside the Lines then on Monday of this week that really kind of had the full rundown. I mean, this was a who's who of underclassmen on campus. There were commitments there. We'll roll through some of the photos here in a little bit while we talk about that. Obviously, Alex Birchmeyer, the 2023 commit, was here. Abdul Carter was here. Fearbry was here. Roye, who again was one of the guys we'll talk about in a bit. Those are the 2022 names to know. And then when you get into 2023, I mean, where do you start? Dante Moore, Lamont Payne, Tamir Robinson, Aiden Schuler, Antonio Tripp, Josiah Trotter, Keon Wright. I mean, what a just tremendously talented group of players that Penn State was able to host. And much like we just talked about a few minutes ago, I mean, throw Ronell Muka in that mix, throw Sean Battle in that mix. I mean, we're talking about guys who didn't make very hard, laborious travel plans to get here. I mean, and that's going to be a key moving forward in the 2023 class, just like it is right now.
Yeah, and Dante Moore was, I believe, the guy from furthest away, which is Detroit, and pretty much everybody else was Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Baltimore, South Jersey. But this is the advantage of finishing your 2022 class. I know it's not done, but it's 89, 95% finished, basically. This is the advantage of that. You can now turn the page and really start to focus on what's another pretty good class in Pennsylvania. I'll start with Lamont Payne. From Chartiers Valley, it's south of Pittsburgh, I believe. I think he's leaning towards Penn State. When he decides, I'm not exactly sure, but I know this is a player that the staff is going to crank up the heat on, and they want to get him on board soon. And big reason why is they love his personality. It's really off the field stuff. I mean, he was great. Was at the whiteout camp, killed it. Everything there checks out. But they think he just could be a leader in this class. So he's someone they really want to get on board soon. I don't believe. Did you mention Tamir Robinson from Bashir in Pittsburgh?
Yep.
Okay, another great player. I had one person tell me that they think Penn State has a slight lead there. There's a long way to go, so I don't want to push that too hard. Visited Ohio State, Pitt, Michigan. I expect all three of those schools to push Penn State. Jameel Lyons is a player from Roman Catholic. He was originally at Bishop McDevitt in Wincott, I believe.
Yes, outside of the other Bishop McDevitt.
The other Bishop McDevitt, yeah. So that school actually closed.
From Harrisburg, yeah.
Yeah, that school actually closed this summer, and the majority of their players and coaches ended up at Archbishop Wood. Lyons is one of the few who didn't follow, and he went to Roman Catholic. Long story short, he came Friday night and absolutely crushed it at camp. 4.8 40, 4.5 second shuttle, 6'4", 240 pounds too. So those are some great numbers. He ends up getting an offer Friday and then actually sticks around for the Lash Bash. So he's a defensive end that I think we're going to be following. Nick Harbor out of Archbishop Wood, another guy from Washington, D.C. I said Archbishop Wood. Archbishop Carroll, Rivals 100 player. We have him as an athlete. I expect him to be a tight end at the next level, although defensive end, can't really rule that out. I know Ty Howe loves him, though, and he's doing a great job with this recruitment. We haven't talked about Ty a lot. With Jerry Cross already committed, the tight end room so stacked. So 2023 is going to be an opportunity to really kind of see what he's all about. And Harbor's one player that he's off to a great start with. Also, one thing I learned about Harbor is that his sister graduated from Penn State. So that'll be interesting moving forward. We didn't hit on Antonio Tripp and Sean Battle. Those were two guys who, going into the weekend, I thought, if there's going to be some movement in 2023, it could be those. Penn State loves both of them. I still get the sense, though, that they want to see a few games, especially with Tripp. Tripp didn't play at all last year. No one from McDonough did. We've talked about this with Nittany, Dennis Sutton, and a bunch of other guys. So I get the impression they want to see a few games from Tripp, get the impression they want to see a few games from Battle. Trotter, another guy we mentioned. I think Penn State's in a pretty good spot there. One thing I know Penn State fans have asked me a lot is, Penn State didn't offer his brother. How's that going to impact them? And from catching up with Trotter, catching up with contacts, they put that to bed a while ago. Penn State got on Josiah very early in the process, and that really kind of put to bed, why they didn't offer Jeremiah Jr. And from what I gather, Penn State flat out admitted that they kind of made a mistake there and they should have offered him. So family seems to be fine with Penn State. I know his dad, of course, Jeremiah Trotter, former Eagles linebacker, he came up to Penn State this weekend, and a lot of the stuff I was told is that he had a great time, and this was his first opportunity to really bond with the staff. So overall, there was, I believe, 15 uncommitted 2023 guys, and that's a great number. With so many 2022 guys committed, and they like to keep this event, not for getting too big because they want to make sure everybody gets a lot of personal time. That was pretty much the max they could have done, again, with so many 2022s already committed. The event's always somewhere between 30 and 40 guys, and I think this year it ended up somewhere around 35. But a great group of players. I think I got into Dante Moore, Tamir Robinson. Oh, Aiden Schuler. I forgot to mention him. He's actually about to make a commitment on August 15th. Still trying to get a feel for what he's thinking. Our guys in South Bend think Notre Dame might be the school. He went to Notre Dame for a camp 1 week ago, actually last Tuesday. then came to Penn State for the Lash Bash. He raved about Penn State. Greg, you talked to him. You can maybe open up a little bit about him, but I get the sense that Penn State's very much in it. But our colleagues in South Bend think that Notre Dame's in the mix too. We'll find out in 2 weeks. So
Notre Dame's in the mix. There's no doubt about that. Maryland was the other school that was the top 3. Yeah, I talked to him on Sunday as we were working the phones trying to get some intel and insight about what this visit weekend was like for these underclassmen, and he decided that he wanted to share that he had a top 3 and he was ready to make this announcement. And then a few hours later, he said that he had a date locked in, and basically, to make a long story short, it's a family. I don't want to call it a family reunion because that's not the word he used, but he's going to have a lot of family and people from maybe outside of the New Jersey or Irvington area in town, and thought, you know what, I want to do this then while I'm with all of these people that mean so much to me. So, yeah, he seemed to really enjoy Penn State. He really hit it off with a lot of the guys he spent time with, and we'll see. I don't have... sometimes when you talk to guys, you get a feel for maybe one school's a little bit more impressive than another one or things like that. I didn't get the feeling of that here. So I could really see him, Ryan, ending up at either Penn State or Notre Dame. Didn't get maybe the strongest feel about Maryland. Maybe just didn't ask the questions the right way. Sometimes that's the way these interviews go. But to me, there's 3 finalists, but I think Penn State and Notre Dame are probably a cut ahead of the Terps right now. We'll see. I mean, there's about 2 weeks or so until he decides, and obviously he really enjoyed Notre Dame and he really enjoyed Penn State, and I think he has a number of other options, but those are the ones that are standing out right now.
Yep, you pretty much hit on it there. I don't have too much to add. I will say that I kind of get the impression that him announcing his commitment kind of maybe caught Penn State off guard a little bit. I don't think from what I gather, they were a little surprised to see that. So not that means good for Notre Dame or bad for Penn State. I just get the impression that they were surprised he's ready to decide. I was surprised he was ready to decide. But he's a great player. Whether he commits or not, look, what is it, 16 months till he can sign?
Right.
If he goes to Notre Dame, it's not like Penn State's going to stop pushing hard for him. I'd be shocked if he's not on campus again at some point down the road.
Yeah, and vice versa. Well, don't surprise us. Do the right thing. Order the 2021 Penn State Football Preview Magazine from Blue White Illustrated. It's 116 pages, full-color, comprehensive guide to the Nittany Lions' upcoming season, which, of course, opens in about a month's time at Wisconsin. You can find the opportunity to order colemanpub.com/BWI-preview, or you can call customer service 814-234-1177, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Ryan, a tremendous month of July for Penn State, and we're reaching the point now where the conversation is not going to totally shift to the current team, but it's going to definitely the scale, so to speak. The scales are going to tip back toward that way. We've spent basically the last 2 months talking very little about the guys who are on campus, spending a lot more time interacting with and learning more about and writing stories about guys who are either committed to Penn State or were committing to Penn State. Obviously, Penn State, as we talked about earlier, number 1 in the Rivals team rankings as we talk in early August. I mean, it was just a run unlike any I think either one of us have ever experienced. It started with J.B. Nelson, the offensive lineman from Lackawanna College, back on July 2nd. Ends, of course, with Abdul Carter on July 31. And in between, you have 4 stars, you have high 3 stars, you have linebackers, defensive linemen, running backs, a 5-star, yes, and Dennis Sutton. You have a little bit of everything in this commitment run. And for Penn State, it was, once the dominoes started falling, we had a feeling that could be the case, that once you get one guy in, then maybe you get another one, then maybe you get another one, and I'll throw the 5-star up to Dennis Sutton here for a second just to show you what he looked like at the Lasch Bash. But it was really a truly impressive run set up by a lot of hard work prior to the chance to host guys either in June or during that last weekend of July.
Yeah, 12 commitments in a month. That's the second time we've seen that happen. This is, I look at this as the second best run I've ever seen from Penn State. And the best, it's so funny, it's funny how quickly people forget, because everyone's, I've never seen anything like this before. This is incredible. It just happened 2 years ago. And the one 2 years ago was even quicker. They had 12 commitments in 15 days between the end of June and then going into early July. And they actually had 14 commitments within the month of, I think it was somewhere like June 2nd to July 5th, somewhere in that run. But look, this is still an incredible run. It was 12 class of 2022 commitments, one class of 2023 commitment, plus Spencer Rowland from Harvard, who, the more I learn about him, Penn State really thinks he's going to contribute down the road. Of course, Tyreese Fearbry committed to and then decommitted, but that was another one. There's a couple things that moving forward kind of grabs my attention here. One is this is grabbing the attention of a lot of recruits. I'm hearing about it all the time. I think I did 5, 6, 7 interviews now since the Lash Bash. And I would say at least half of them, maybe even 60, 70% of them have said, hey, I'm seeing what Penn State's doing here. They're doing a great job. And they're also connecting with these 2022 guys. This 2022 class is special from the perspective of peer recruiting. And then that's something that, Penn State's had good classes with that, but this is definitely one of the best. They're connecting with 2023 guys. For example, Lamont Payne was, talking a lot about Caden Saunders, Mekhi Flowers, Ken Talley. So that's grabbing the attention of recruits. That's a big thing. And then the other thing I'd like to mention is just the fact that the pressure is off Penn State's staff a little bit. And of course, they keep recruiting throughout August. There's a lot of work to do. But just knowing where they stand now with the class 95% done, going into a preseason where they're coming off the worst season under Franklin's tenure, that is a weight off your shoulders that I don't think maybe fans quite some of them get it, I guess, but it's just a major confidence boost moving forward for them. This time last year, a lot of people were wondering what some of the new assistants bring on the recruiting trail. Is anyone talking about that now? I'm not talking about it. No one else is. Phil Troutwine did a great job. Stubblefield did a great job. John Scott ended up getting some great defensive linemen. That's a major confidence, a major plus for them moving forward. And now, again, they'll keep doing the calls. They'll keep zooming guys, really pushing with 2023s as well. But they can really kind of focus on preseason now, where a lot of the schools that they're competing against in the region still have to put a lot more effort in on their 2022 class in August, especially to set up visits for those early season games. So I think those two things, man, recruits grabbing the attention or, seeing what Penn State's doing here, and then also just that confidence from the staff that, they had a hell of a summer and now they can focus on their team. Those two things just haven't been talked about as much, and I wanted to get that out there. And especially just from talking to sources, man, I can just tell from people on Lash, they are freaking pumped right now. They're really excited, and they think that they can, use this momentum into the fall and start getting some 2023 dominoes to fall.
Yeah, to me, it just feels like it's a little bit of a different vibe. I know you're 100% correct that this is not the first time in the Franklin era or even in the last handful of cycles that this kind of a run has been put together, but the vibe just feels different to me. And I don't know if that's because we're coming out of the slog of not making visits and all that for so long. I don't know if it's because of the caliber of player they're getting, not to say that they didn't get a lot of very good players in the run 2 years ago, because they did, but it feels like a different vibe about it. Maybe it is the fact that they're coming off a 4-5 season that was just ugly in so many ways, and now things seem to be firing on all cylinders at just the right time heading into camp. So, yeah, you put all those things together, Ryan, and it is a run just not quite like anything that we've seen often, I guess, is probably more, instead of saying, well, we've never seen it before, we haven't seen it often and the last number of years. And for Penn State, it's a springboard into the 2021 season and beyond.
Well, and you did hit on one thing there that is important I didn't mention earlier, is this is deeper than that previous run as far as talent. 7 4- or 5-star players within those 12 2022 commits. I'm not including Birchmeyer in that, who's also maybe the highest ceiling of all of them aside from Nittany. So I guess 8, we'll say out of 13. That is definitely a deeper, more talented group compared to that 2020 group, which I think had maybe like 3 or 4 stars and then predominantly 3 stars. So yeah, from that perspective, this is definitely different. Obviously Penn State's number one in the nation right now because of that. So that's a good point that I didn't hit on earlier.
All right, well, we're about 35 minutes through this show, a little bit longer than most we do, but it's certainly worth it with all the news to get to, and we still have more to talk about. So you mentioned earlier in the show, Ryan, that Penn State at this point is at 24, of course. Maybe you can go 25 or 26. Maybe, again, like we've talked about before, Tyreese Fearbry being an example, decommitments happen, and you could end up with some movement to keep your numbers where they're at right now, but maybe the class makeup's a little bit different. Don't see anyone that you would think is a main candidate for that, but you never know. So at any rate, two guys that I think it's worth hitting on quick. Darrius Clemons, the receiver from Oregon, has a top 3 now, and Roye, the offensive lineman, has a decision date. Let's talk about those two guys and where Penn State stands with them. I guess one other note, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but Alex Van Sumeren, who's a defensive lineman we talked about before, picks Michigan State, so he's now out of the mix.
Yeah, it wasn't a surprise, Van Sumeren. He was leaning Michigan State. We knew Penn State was giving them a push, but just with the way, getting Caleb Artis and Durant, that made it, I think, easier for Van Sumeren. But let's make it 3 guys, because one guy you didn't mention there is DJ Wesolak, the defensive end out of Boonville, Missouri. So all 3 of these guys are kind of who I'm focused on the most. There's a couple others. Omari Evans is a wide receiver from Texas that I think we're sleeping on a little bit. But we'll start with Roye. Sets a September 22nd commitment date, which is perfect for Penn State. I think once they saw that, they were very happy with that date. And that gives them all of preseason and even early into the season to evaluate some of the younger guys on their offensive line. I still get the impression that even if a bunch of their young guys do step it up and, are looking great, they still want to add Roye. They really want to add Aamil Wagner too, but Wagner's going to drag this out probably all the way to the All-American Bowl. So
I just talked to him. Yeah, I just talked to him earlier this week, and that is the plan. Yes, at this point in time, yeah.
Notre Dame's probably the favorite there, but Penn State's definitely in the mix too. He's another guy, with Omari Evans. I think we're kind of sleeping on a bit, but there's just no spots. I don't know.
Right.
Obviously, all these guys can't fit in here. But long story short, Penn State's very happy with that September 22nd date. Gives them time to look over their roster, kind of evaluate some things, try to figure out where they can plug in 1 or 2 more players, whether it's offensive line, whether it's wide receiver, defensive end. We'll see what happens. So Maryland, I think, is Penn State's top competitor there, although he did visit all 4 of his top schools this past week. He went to NC State, I believe it was Wednesday last week. Then he went to Rutgers on Friday. Then he saw Penn State and Maryland on Saturday. So we'll see what happens with Roye. 6'6", 320, heck of an offensive tackle prospect. Still a little raw. There's a lot to mold, and Troutwine loves what he's seeing from him there. So Darrius Clemons then, 6'4", 220, Portland, Oregon. Named a top 3, Auburn, Penn State, Oregon, which wasn't much of a surprise. I've been thinking for a while now that Auburn is Penn State's main competitor there, but he hasn't opened up about it too much. Either way, I expect him to be back for a game, and it may be that Penn State-Auburn game. He hasn't figured out exactly what his schedule is yet, but this is another guy that I think Penn State will find room for if they can do it. He has a very close relationship with Caden Saunders, so those two are going to be pushing the staff, or Caden's going to be pushing the staff for sure to get Darrius in here. And I don't think he has to push too hard. Penn State definitely wants him. Then, of course, Wesolak, 6'3", 238 out of Boonsville, Missouri. The thing with Wesolak that was interesting is I interviewed him the other day, and I'm going to have a story on him probably tomorrow. He really wants to play linebacker. Like, he seems like pretty adamant that he wants to play linebacker at 6'3", 230, or 240 basically. He's 238. I'll be curious to see how schools balance that. We were talking earlier about, playing one position, preferring another. That'll be an interesting one because it was my second or third time talking to him, and we really got into what he prefers, and he was adamant about linebacker. But anyway, definitely Penn State definitely prefers him as a defensive end, and I do expect him to attend the whiteout game. I had mixed opinions or mixed facts. Like, I don't know what I'm trying to say there, but some people were telling me it was set. DJ was saying it was set, but then I had a couple other people saying it wasn't quite set. But either way, I would say 80% chance, 90% chance he'll be at that Auburn game. And he wanted to visit in June. He actually was trying to come the first weekend in June, but Penn State was trying to keep that a condensed week just because they also had a junior day in there, so they didn't want to keep piling on players, which he understood. It was fine. That was actually an issue with a lot of schools this year. So he wasn't able to make it in June, wanted to visit, and that relationship has been strong throughout. So with Fearbry now opening things up, of course, they're going to keep pursuing Tyreese as well. But Wesolak definitely is coming into play here, and if that visit goes well next month, he's certainly someone that I could see them trying to squeeze into this class.
So the whiteout game will be the next big visit weekend, but of course, Ball State, there'll be players on campus as well. Ryan, camp's about to start. Any final thoughts for this edition of the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Football and Recruiting Podcast? We covered a lot of ground, got to a lot of different things with 2022, 2023, beyond, commitments, decommitments. Any final thoughts before we finish out this final week without practices, before we get rolling in August with the current team right into the opener at Wisconsin?
I'm just grateful it's August. That's all I got, man.
I'm sure you are.
It's been a crazy 3 months, but it's been fun. It's been great for our site. I know fans are super excited about it. Starting back in May when camp started opening up, we saw, fans getting excited. Then in June, of course, with all those visits, it was funny, man, because at one point everybody was worried, that there wasn't going to be a run, and how can you host 40 kids? And at the time, it was only Tyler Johnson who committed. That dominated our message board for a week, and then of course you get to July 2nd, and all hell broke loose. Basically, is the best way to put it, man. It was a heck of a run. So it was fun. I wouldn't be shocked at all if we see a 2023 commitment or somebody in 2022 try to jump on board in August. But for the most part, guys tame it down in August. Coaches are obviously focusing on their team. Players are getting ready for their junior and senior seasons. There will be a little recruiting, but it's about to really take down a notch, which is great because I need a vacation. So
yes, you do. You've earned it. This has been the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Football and Recruiting Podcast. Visit us, bwi.rivals.com, for the latest recruiting and team news. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button, tap that bell to get notified when either our videos, T. Frank's videos, whatever come up, you'll know right away. If you're listening to a podcast app, please subscribe, like, rate, give us feedback. And Ryan, Blue White Illustrated is the home for Penn State football and recruiting news. You also get podcasts, videos, bwi.rivals.com. And don't forget about that 116-page preview magazine. You can learn more, colemanpub.com/bwi-preview. He's Ryan Snyder. I'm Greg Pickel, and this has been the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Football and Recruiting Podcast.